name is Crystal Joy.
And I'm David Razio.
And this is I'm Psychic.
I guess,
because apparently anybody can be a psychic according to the internet, and we're doing that because why not?
Disclaimer, we don't know everything. We don't pretend to know everything. So if we get some things wrong, please bear with us. The point is that we don't know everything, and we're trying to figure it out. So keep that in mind while you are listening. If you have some good things to say, please say them nicely, and we will listen.
Yep.
If you say them like a jerk, though, we will not listen.
We want to grow. We want to learn. We understand. If we say something problematic or incorrect or whatever, let us know kindly. Give us your sources, and we will learn. This is a growing and learning experience together. I feel like there's another part of the disclaimer that I just don't remember. Oh, yeah. I remember now. We approach psychic ability and spiritual things with a skeptical, grounded, and curious and open-minded lens, which means for the sake of the experiment, I guess we are approaching these things as though it is a thing one can do to try not to give ourselves subconscious blockages to preventing it from happening. With that, we might be like, when you do blah, 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 or when I did blah, 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 and this was a factual happening. It's all anecdotal and it's all experiential based on what we felt, and we will ultimately dive into what that might mean psychologically, the ego, and the skeptical approach to what the happening is. But with that, we are still explaining, like, when the energy moves like this, blah, 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 blah. It's so that we don't subconsciously block ourselves from being able to do it if it is in fact a thing. And that's it. Those are all the disclaimers. So last week, well, actually not last week, we took a little break last week, and I didn't post about the break, so I'm sorry if you were confused and you were looking. I'm sorry. We're kind of taking a non-stress approach to this. It is supposed to be weekly, but you know, weeks be difficult sometimes, and they overworked David, and we did not have him, and I just didn't want to deal with it, and David didn't want to either.
We do as we can.
We do as we can. With that, the week before last, we were talking about pitfalls of spiritual spaces, dangers that could happen, and things to avoid and keep in mind when we consume things through the discernment list that we did even a few weeks before that.
Right. Such a good discernment list that you came up with.
Yes, and you gave me feedback on it. It's our discernment list. And so now, do you remember what we were going to talk about this week?
I don't.
I love you. We're going to talk about alt-right pipelines.
We're going to talk about alt-right pipelines.
Good job. We were going to cover this last week, but we just talked for a really long time and had a lovely conversation that got cut off halfway through, and it was really annoying. So we got discouraged and didn't finish the conversation. So we had to recount a solid 15 to 20 minutes of our conversation last week. It was so annoying.
That was so disheartening.
So now, because we did that, we didn't get to all right pipelines, which is chunky in my notes. And again, I have notes here that I have not reviewed because we're taking a stress-free approach to this, and I wrote these notes well over a month ago now. Mm-hmm. So we're going to go through them. We're going to talk about them. It is potentially a sticky subject. If we said at the beginning, if I don't get it right, I'm sorry. I'm trying my best. And let's just go. Mm-hmm. David, what do you think about how a person in a spiritual space can fall into what would be an alt-right pipeline?
The only thing that comes to mind is church. So,
ooh, how so?
I don't know if it's that church was always like this and I just grew out of it, or if it's something that's new within the church because of Trump.
Like, you don't know if it's unbiased or not?
I genuinely do not know.
It was always a little bit like that.
It's probably a little bit like this always, yeah.
What was surprising to me when I got into the spirituality and spiritual spaces, that presence was still there outside of a church setting.
Right.
And it was odd to me.
Well, that's why I said churches, because I've never been so bigoted and yet thought I was the good guy at the same time.
Yeah.
I guess those are how villains are born. But
reverse villain story
where you joined. Damn, that sounds really fucked up. But
well, what's so funny is the reverse villain story, but that's interesting. Sorry, my brain's doing a thing where it's like, this reverse villain story. You were the bigoted thing that you thought that you were so right, but now you're doing what that group villainizes and says is the bad guy. So you've lived long enough to see yourself become the villain, only to discover that the villain was never the villain in the first place.
That's not a saying.
It is now. It's like a weird, just a brain thought that happened in my brain just now.
It's a good thought. I was just curious because, although the intentions were always good, and I think for the most part, at the base level, those people who are going to church, the intentions are good. I think it's the higher ups that see the manipulation for what it is, and then you just kind of parrot and become,
You perpetuate it.
you perpetuate it, and you're bettering than thou other people. You are falling into this doctrine that becomes infallible. And no matter how,
Don't ask questions, basically.
well, one, you don't really,
You're encouraged to not ask any
you're
questions.
encouraged to ask questions that
No,
don't
you're
get
not.
to the heart of it.
No, you're not encouraged to ask any questions.
You're encouraged to ask questions that don't get to the heart of it. It's an
Thing is,
illusion of questions.
It's the facade of questions.
But
It's
the
like question theater.
The problem is within the doctrine of itself, anything can be explained away with belief, and that is.
But when you start questioning the belief, that's when you can't ask questions.
The belief is like, when you're a kid and you're like, well, times 99, and that was like the top thing. You know what I mean? Like
There
this,
was no, like,
or not even
questioning
times 99,
that.
or like this plus infinity. I'm this plus infinity, so that's just how it goes. That's like the belief. You know what I mean? It's like,
Okay, well, what does that have to do with alt-right pipelines?
well, it falls into this infallible
Don't ask questions.
don't ask questions, which is dangerous.
It is dangerous.
I guess you should define what alt-right pipeline means.
You know what? I'm gonna Google that because that's a good thing, and it's not in my notes. So let's learn together, everybody. Hold on. Wikipedia. The alt-right pipeline is a conceptual model regarding internet radicalization towards the alt-right movement. It describes a phenomenon in which consuming provocative right-wing political content, such as anti-feminist or anti-SJW ideas, gradually increases exposure to the alt-right or similar far-right politics.
And what did I say? I said that
Well,
it becomes
hold on. Now we have to ask, what is the alt-right movement? Like that, to know that, we have to also like define that.
Well, yeah, sure, but I can even. All right.
Hold on. Let's finish
go
the
ahead.
Wikipedia.
Yeah, finishing the Wikipedia.
Alt-right, is according to Wikipedia, is a far white nationalist movement. So it's a white supremacy thing.
Right.
A largely online phenomenon, the alt-right originated in the United States during the late 2000s before increasing in popularity and establishing its presence in other countries during the mid-2010s, and has been declining since 2017. That's a lie. I feel like if it's declining, it's gotten really loud about it. The term is ill-defined and has been used in various ways by academics, journalists, media communicators, and alt-right members themselves.
So, that being said, within what I said, whereas that the question that you ask cannot be asked because it's infallible, you have certain doctrines that already have within it in Christianity that are men are always right, alt-right thought processes that are built into
It's superiority.
Christianity. That are built into
I think
Christianity.
the keynote is superiority.
Yeah.
Because when you read about alt-right and alt-right pipelines, it kind of is rooted in this white nationalist thing. If I scroll down Wikipedia just a little bit more, the alt-right movement espouses pseudoscientific idea of biological racism and promotes a form of identity politics in favor of European Americans and white people internationally. It goes on and on and on, but what I'm seeing here is superiority. In religious spaces or spiritual spaces, we bounced to church specifically because we spent so much of our lives in church.
Right.
And that's where we see that's why a lot of right-wing conservative politics conflate their belief with their politics, because they are one and the same essentially, which is espousing and perpetuating superiority in some way.
And when you ask how can spirituality lead to alt-right pipelines, that's the first thought that comes to my mind. This conflation of better than thou and power and superiority within a body that's supposed to be it's preaching a savior complex within its congregation.
And what does the savior complex have to do with white nationalism, which seemed to be a very big thing according to Wikipedia? Again, guys, we're just going, like, I just Googled that right now. So if you know more about it, let me know.
What does that have to do with white nationalism?
Yeah, because that was a large part of the alt-right pipeline.
Well, you have a superiority within white nationalism in general.
Well, white nationalism is the church and a large part of it. Controlling those who are less than you, which is ultimately what it comes down to, is controlling those who quote unquote disagree with you, as we're seeing with a lot of the Supreme Court decisions currently.
And it posed as a helping those less than you because they don't know any better. I mean, you're obviously...
Like, that's what they're telling you.
Yeah, and that's what they tell the congregation. So the congregation goes out and tells other people these messages and conflates all these thought processes because they think that they're helping, and this is what they've been told.
That reminds me of missionaries
Yeah. It's
Why
exactly.
missionaries are bad. Thankfully, I'm so grateful that I never went on a mission trip.
Yeah.
I wanted to, because that was like the pinnacle, you're a good kid, you are a good person thing to do as a, you know, indoctrinated, brainwashed child that I was. And I never did. It never worked out, thank God. But the shattering of the mirror for me was when somebody was like, that's modern day colonization and colonialism, which basically is saying it's no different than the white people coming here to the United States, what would ultimately become the United States, the Americas, and forcing the native people to believe what they believe so that they can control them. And that's what missionary work is. And I was like, ooh, it's like, fuck your culture, fuck your beliefs. It's invalid and stupid, and you should listen to me so I can control you and you could be manipulated by what I believe, which is the right thing.
So though this conversation is highly influenced by what's happening in America right now, I know we don't want to get too political about it because that's not what this podcast is about.
No, but alt-right pipelines are a huge thing in spiritual spaces. And I think to be grounded and to ask questions and to be discerning is to be mindful that it is very much a reality of things that you can easily fall into.
That's true.
If you're not discerning, if you're not doing these things, you can easily fall into that. You know
One
what I mean?
can also argue that the only reason they have the power that they have is because
Nobody's-
of spirituality.
What makes you say that?
Well, spirituality is supposed to be a higher power. And this higher thought
Okay.
process of power is something that a lot of people believe in. And that is what allows a lot of bullshittery to be bypassed. Right? You have things that Trump has done. You have things that people who are, quote unquote, trying to abide by the church and oppressing other people are getting away with because they have one rule that people will love, which is like abortion, right? Abortion, their ideas on how abortion should be taken care of, rather how abortion shouldn't be allowed to be a thing. And because of that, everyone overlooks all the other shitty stuff that is happening where you have like...
No, you have people like unfortunate people that I'm annoyingly related to saying to my face that they're a one-issue voter in the midst of the atrocities that have happened over the last few years. And it always comes down to abortion, which in and of itself, what I've recently learned, in and of itself is rooted in white supremacy.
Correct. So you see this issue being bypassed, like a lot of really bad practices that seem to be common sense, right? Like obviously you're taking people's rights. You're not. I mean, you have the schools only being able to accept white kids. You have all these things that are happening right now. Gay rights. We're like going backwards, right? It feels like we're going backwards, and all those things are being said in the name of Christianity, really, in the name of a god.
It's selective, but yeah.
It's selective.
It's so selective.
Sometimes it's God. Sometimes
because it's not God. It's not the divine. It's
no,
control.
But
which
that's
is
what
it is.
That's what it's painted as.
It's conflated as.
And when people see it that way, then it becomes what is morally correct.
This is what's
because of that spiritual aspect of it, and that's why I said it's because of spirituality.
So,
it could be because of spirituality that America is the way it is right now.
Well, I understand and
commercialized rather.
I understand and
of course it is.
and how I understand it and
Of
how
course.
I feel like it's meant to be understood, and not that I have everything correct. Even I don't know a lot of the stuff. But how often do I say it's the same shit in different packaging if you
Sure.
approach it in the wrong way? And it is. And in that regard, that flavor of spirituality, which is what leads to these alt-right pipelines, is a large part of it.
Yeah, spirituality is a very, very broad
Broad.
brush to paint everything in. So it's unfair to just say that spirituality is the reason, but it all falls under that same umbrella.
Church is technically a spirituality.
It is. That's what it's painted as.
And I know that's what you're saying.
And that's what it's painted
But
as.
New Age spirituality specifically this is what we're going to get into, New Age spirituality, which is what leads to these alt-right pipelines.
Right.
So in spiritual spaces, you want to learn everything that you can about energetics, about like your own psyche, about your own ego, about our impact on the world around us, both physically and energetically, and what that means, and blah, 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 blah. And as you're discovering these things, ideas start to pop up that without the research and without the discernment, you can easily fall back into repackaged evangelicalism with different names and verbiage.
Because that's how they got there in the first place.
Yes. So people who haven't properly deconstructed either their own indoctrination as children,
Right.
who then fall into the same patterns under different packaging and don't really realize that that's what they're doing.
Right.
Which, being 100, that started with me. Like the first few months of my spiritual awakening, that was a large part of it. I wasn't doing the research. I was just excited and like, ooh, Palo Santo and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Like chakras. And, my intention obviously wasn't bad, but I hadn't fully deconstructed yet until it was pointed out to me. I was like, oh, I don't want to fall back into that. I spent my whole life in that. I don't want to. And that's where this came from. Be grounded, be skeptical, blah, blah, blah. So I have written here, I mentioned it at the end of the previous episode, but the QAnon shaman, quote unquote, from the insurrection ran a quote unquote Starseed Academy.
Starseed Academy.
So the guy in the buffalo hat or whatever the fuck, that dude, a self-proclaimed white shaman. There's so many things wrong with that. Had a Starseed Academy, which we've mentioned briefly, which I will get into further here in this episode, why the Starseed situation or the Indigo children or the blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it's an issue. And if you identify as that, I'm not here to take your thunder or your feelings or anything like that. I am going to offer the information that I have, and you can do with that whatever you wish.
Well, you did just say it was a problem.
It is like the terminology and the way it came about.
In your opinion.
In my opinion, is an issue. And I think when I heard and learned what I have currently, I was like, oh yeah, that is an issue.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll get into the complexities of where that comes from psychologically versus like why somebody would feel, yeah, I'm a starseed, obviously, blah, 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 blah. And why that in and of itself is ignorantly like you're not in trying to do anything wrong here. You just feel ostracized and feel like you don't belong and blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
And you identify with this thing, which, if you have not listened to our previous episodes, for those who don't know, starseeds is a term that is thrown around in spiritual spaces to refer to the souls of certain people who are supposedly non-human souls who have come to Earth and have chosen to incarnate as human beings to make the world a better place. And so they are thereby naturally superior to other people.
Naturally.
And they are also generally, they don't feel connected with humanity. They feel ostracized a lot of the time. They don't really feel like humanity is home.
I love how people always find a way. They just always find a way to make themselves, like, special. I get Gen Z's, like, you're not special.
Yeah.
Everybody's an NPC.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I get it. I really do. I do feel like the special thought process does lead to a lot of this
problems.
narcissistic stuff.
Which is what we talked about in the last episode. So we're going to get into why I say starseeds and the like, because I've also heard the term indigo children and all of these special baby, special kids, special people from special places who are more special than you and don't belong because they're special. Okay, this is where it comes from. I have my notes here. I'm going to just read it off and we're going to talk about it. Birthed from root race theory in the late 1800s by Helena Blavatsky, which is basically a theory that there were a variety of spiritual beings living on Atlantis before it fell, and these beings went on to create different races of humankind. Again, in spiritual spaces, there's this overarching understanding that Atlantis was in fact a thing, that something question mark happened. We don't know what. But they were highly advanced. And I've also heard, just more context, that this was before the Earth's vibration fell. So, like, there were higher vibration Earth. These are all the things I've heard. I'm not saying I believe this. I am highly skeptical of everything that I'm saying. This is just what I've consumed online. That this is the case. And when the Earth was a higher vibration, that's why we have these understandings of dragons multiculturally, because they're a higher vibrational being that we could actually see and engage with. And that's why we have these gods and goddesses that are higher vibrational beings that were able to be seen because the Earth was a higher vibration thing happened. The Earth's vibration fell. Atlantis is Kaputski. In a lot of different spaces, I've heard some variation of that, which honestly, to me, as a deconstructed Christian, all I hear is the fall of man redux.
Yeah, I can see that.
Like, Atlantis is the Garden of Eden and something happened and everything went to shit, i.e. the vibration of the Earth fell and now we can't be close to God anymore. I'm like, it's the same. The Office, like, it's the same picture. Maybe, in some capacity, maybe. Like, I'm not closed to it, but like as far as like this is the logistics, I'm like, I'm not sold. not sold on it. Anyway, so root race theory, Helena Blavatsky, 1800s, right? Atlantis fell, and before it fell, the beings from it went on to create the different races of humankind, which is why there are different races.
What's funny is that people who are in a Christian background would look at that and be like, that's ridiculous.
I know. That's what's so sad. They'd be like, that's fucking ridiculous. I'm like, it's the same thing. Okay, anyway, you're so fucking right. And it's sad, and that's why I laugh. If I didn't laugh, I would cry. Okay, so this root race theory situation from the late 1800s, that caught the attention of, you guessed it, 1930s Germany. And so that's literally where the word Aryan comes from.
I would not have guessed that, but yes.
Aryan race is from this Atlantis fall root race theory thingy.
Ah.
So.
I've learned something today as well.
So. Now moving on to my next bullet point, we then have something called the Golden Dawn, which you've heard me talk about before, David.
Yes, I have.
So the Golden Dawn is a group of people from the late 1800s who were like, occultism shouldn't be so secret. It shouldn't be something that is so hard to get their hands on. We should make sure everybody has access to it.
So basically the opposite of a cult.
Kind of. They honestly, for the time, they were rather progressive. They like let women not only be in the society but also like lead, which was a big deal back then.
Humans always find a way. I'm just saying, like, this thought process of humans being shitty, it's just like a cult, meaning like it's secret and you have to work to find it, is the nice thing to say. But no, it's like a cult, as in women can't do it because you're a woman.
Well, that's just patriarchal culture.
God
which
damn it.
Is what most things have been run under for a long time.
And I'm just like, they find a way to ruin everything.
Well, either way, they let the women lead and they let the women do stuff, which was kind of progressive. But again, nothing is ever black and white. Nothing is ever good or bad. The Golden Dawn took, this is not in my notes, but this is just what I know of the Golden Dawn personally. For those who are interested, they were a society of people who were kind of piecing together all of the magical type information and creating a magical system from it. So they used Hermetics, they used Jewish mysticism of Kabbalah, they used Enochian and a few other documented things from the last few hundred years and created their own magical system to accomplish magical things. And that is ultimately, without the Golden Dawn, we wouldn't have Aleister Crowley, who is kind of like the godfather of a Western occultism as we know it today, and we wouldn't have more modern practices like chaos magic.
Yeah.
Or Wicca, actually.
Not to be affiliated with Supernatural.
No, it's a different guy.
I know it's the same Crowley.
It's a different guy.
I know it's the same Crowley.
That's where the name came from, but in the show Supernatural, it's a completely... Anyway, don't worry about it.
I know. That was a joke. That was a joke.
Also, like, Wicca, the guy who created Wicca was friends with Aleister Crowley, and he was like, I'm going to make a cult. Don't even get me started on Wicca. That's a whole thing. So, Western occultism all leads back to the Golden Dawn. So, around the same time that this woman, Helena Blavatsky, in the 1800s was like, root race theory in Atlantis, the Golden Dawn was like, let's make a cool club where we wear cloaks and walk around in circles.
I don't blame them.
They're really extra. But all of their tools look so fucking ugly. I'm like, why make a secret society and like have magical tools and they're also fucking ugly? Look up the Golden Dawn like chalice and like wand. It's so ugly. Anyway,
somebody's like,
sorry. I can't get into it. I'm such an aesthetic bitch, and it bothers me so much how ugly all the tools are. Anyway,
I like how we said this episode might be a hot topic, and it's been nothing but hot topics. And people are going to hate what we've said.
My opinion is not the end all be all. I'm still learning. I'm still growing.
It's not just you. I've said some shit that people fucking will hate. I know this.
And this is my spiritual journey, and I'm sharing what I've learned so far. But also, my opinion on what the Golden Dawn magical tools look like it's just my opinion. I think they're ugly, and so I can't fuck with it. I saw that you had written something down earlier, David. Did you want to talk about it before I move too far on?
Really quick, it was just a touch on the superiority thing.
Yeah.
That I, even as a Christian myself, had an issue with. There was this savior thing where you're supposed to save people and you get crowns. You get a little
jewels in your crown or a bigger mansion or whatever.
In heaven, right? You get this crazy reward or whatever. And that was kind of what pushed people to do.
Like you get bigger or better things in heaven. Like the more you
right. And then if you really
people.
had a heart for people, it was like, oh, I don't care about the jewel. It was really just to save people, right? But in that is a, what you call it? It's not narcissistic, but it's a
Self-serving?
self-serving, more proud.
Pra-
What's the word? It escapes me right now. It's like you think that you should be the one to save people, like that you could save people.
Hero complex?
It's a hero complex. Yeah, there was a word for it. I just couldn't think of it right
Savior
now.
complex?
Well, you think you would be the one to save people, and it always combated my inner thoughts because I was brought up poor.
Yeah.
And so people always thought that they were better than me.
Yeah.
And people better off financially always thought they were better than me. Just classism and stuff.
Yeah.
And so there
And
was
racism.
And racism.
David is Hispanic, for those who do not know.
There was just a thought process that, no one's better than anyone, right? And so if you have no one's better than anyone due to your class and everything you see around you, and you can do anything if you just try and be smart. That's what they were telling you when you were younger anyway. Then you have this thought process in Christianity being taught to you where it's like your job is to save people who are less than you. Essentially, as much as you want to dress it up, that's what it is.
Yeah.
I always had an issue with that.
Yeah.
And that never sat well with me.
Because of your upbringing?
Because of that upbringing.
You felt like no better than those guys?
Well, yeah, there was this problem with classism, and then you have the savior complex in religion combating. If everyone's equal, and just because you have more money than me doesn't mean you're better than me. Well, then why am I better than you if I believe and you don't? Why is it?
Why do I get to go to heaven and you don't?
Essentially.
Just because I believe this thing.
Essentially. Yeah. And then people would just say, well, that's just the way the world works. Right? And it's the same thing with poor people and rich people, right? It's just the way the world works. There's a clash there.
You didn't try hard enough?
Yeah, you didn't try hard enough. Like, fuck you. You were born with a silver spoon in your mouth. And you have all these things and all these advantages. And then you're touting how hard you worked.
Yeah.
Not the same equal footing. How does that conform with religion?
You didn't work hard enough. You didn't love Jesus enough. You didn't do enough good works. You didn't get enough jewels in your crown.
What is good enough to get into heaven, right? And then there was that. There was that. So I was kind of.
There is no good enough because all you have to do is believe, which just makes people be shitty, but also
have
better than you.
They're able to be shitty, have an excuse about it, and also still get into heaven.
Yeah.
And think that they're better than you, and that's the issue, right? My issue is not that everybody's not perfect, and that's a given, but it's that because you don't believe I am better than you, of it, and even if you don't want to think that's
you
what it comes.
Ultimately do.
That's what it comes to.
I think that's why I get so frustrated. Before we move on to the Golden Dawn stuff, I think that's why I get so frustrated. Maybe we should do an episode just about our deconstruction because this is deconstruction talk, basically.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll do that next time. So I won't dwell too hard on this, but when the wool was pulled from mine eyes, using Bible talk, and I saw what cannot be unseen, the truth of the matter, I exited the cave, I was like, oh, fuck. It's always been rooted in that. As much as I told myself otherwise,
right.
At the end of the day, that's where it goes, is this self-serving superiority thing. It has to. You can tell yourself you're approaching it because you love people, because you want to be good and blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, what are you doing? What are you doing? Why are you doing it?
And that's why that's why
we'll get into that further later. Another episode about deconstruction.
Yeah, I'll save it for that episode.
Let's write it down so you don't forget. We'll do a deconstruction episode. But now, all right, pipelines. All right, which is all technically part of deconstruction, right? Even if you were not in a church space, deconstructing your own spirituality is very important, right? So the Golden Dawn saw themselves as an elite organization dedicated to helping humanity evolve into superhumans, which was news to me. I had heard all this other stuff about the Golden Dawn, what I said earlier, and then I heard that, and I was like, oh, well, yeah, start looking into it, and you're like, okay, well, that makes sense. Part of this involved occult eugenics. The Golden Dawn thought that you could draw down powers from the stars and the spirit world during procreation and pregnancy, thereby creating what Aleister Crowley called a moonchild.
What? So you having some star sex?
Adult warning? I don't know. Sex magic is a thing.
Yeah, that I know.
What
I didn't know is that you're having star babies by gathering dust from the universe?
Dust.
Is that what's going on?
You could draw down, this is what I have written down. You could, and I have my little link with the source. You could draw down powers from the stars and the spirit world during procreation and pregnancy, thereby creating what Aleister Crowley called a moonchild. So I guess you could do energetically a certain thing and summon an extraterrestrial being to be in the soul of the baby you're gonna have?
The real question is, does she orgasm?
Who knows, honestly. It's the olden days and they're all old white dudes. Probably not.
That sucks because you're having star powers right now. All right.
Probably not. Judging by how Aleister Crowley spoke about women in his, what the fuck is it called? Thelema? God, the shit that I've read. Anyway, no hate on Thelema either, guys. But also, if you're part of Thelema, you already know. Like, and you're cool, you know that they're, you know. Okay, so those two things kind of go together. This Aryan person thing and these like magical children.
Right.
Right.
It all stems to the superiority of.
And this also was a part of Nazi Germany.
Okay.
All of those things kind of worked together to make Hitler go, you know what? Why don't we only have that?
Why don't we only have Nazi magic?
Why don't we only have Aryan moon children?
Right.
Obviously. Okay.
Obviously.
Okay, so more on the starseed thing. Starseeds in and of themselves are also hinged on this ideology that you chose to incarnate as a special being, thereby making you special, and thereby meaning that if you incarnated as an oppressed person or in an oppressed culture and have a bad or a hard life, which is what we touched on that one episode, you're like, oh, that was fucked up. This is what I was talking about. Then not only did you choose that before incarnating, you deserve what happens to you in this life because of the karma that you brought with you. So with that, we see alt-right talking points starting to emerge that oppression is not a systemic issue, but a personal and a spiritual issue.
Right.
And that the oppressed are willing participants in their own oppression.
And what would make someone who has bad karmic issues say, you know what? I'm going to choose to get punished for all those things.
To get rid of the karma.
Oh, to get rid of all the karma.
Yeah, to even it out, to have.
But if you never choose that, then you never get rid of the karma.
Yeah.
But then nothing bad ever happens to you.
I don't know, man. I don't know, man. So like we have like officially 3 solid points here of just how wildly problematic. It's a borderline dog whistle with starseeds.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry if you identify as a starseed and you're upset about this. I invite you, as somebody who's had their whole worldview yanked out from under them. It sucks, but it's really important to be able to analyze objectively information about things that you identify as from a place of understanding and skepticism and groundedness, which is the whole point of this podcast. So why do people then identify as starseeds? Right? It's this idea, like, oh, I'm this extraterrestrial, I'm this special kind of person, right? Where I don't relate to other people. I am ostracized by my community. I feel like I don't belong. So it's pretty much just how neurodivergent kids feel.
Yeah. It probably just comes from stemming from not fitting in.
Yes, exactly. And it seems like this safe, honestly, delicious to your ego reason why your life is the way that it is and why you don't fit in. And it's a problem.
Yeah.
It's a problem.
I understand if, as someone whose life has been shitty, you want something to
explain it
and
justify it.
Yeah.
And make it better.
It's got to make sense somehow. Otherwise, you go to dark places.
Into dark places. Yeah. So that's what I have. There's a lot more. I'll try to drop links. I'll try to remember to drop links in the description of this episode. But do you have, before I move on to the next point I have, any thoughts or questions or interesting things about starseeds from what I've said, or about eugenics, or
no, I
moon children?
Didn't think
Atlantis.
We talk about how starseeds relate to Nazis, but you know.
I mean, I said that in that one episode. You can't have starseeds without Nazis.
And that's a rough statement. Out of all things,
is.
You really don't want to be at all related to that.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem like something that's a good idea.
Lots of issues with that.
I'm also surprised that Supernatural has so many things sort of right. You know what I mean? It's just like you have all these...
Well, because they just probably picked and choose things that are just like, that's in the occult world. You get it in there with no context. It's like what anime does a lot. Like in, what's it called? Black Clover, the anime. They just have the Kabbalic Tree of Life as like a super important aspect of the plot line.
Yeah.
And they have a whole like magical group called the Golden Dawn. And that's literally it.
Yeah.
Nothing else is correct. It's like Sailor Moon and the planets. None
Fair.
of the planets are accurate to how the fucking planets actually move or work. It's just colors.
Close enough. Close enough. We got
It's
there.
not close. It's not close. It's wrong.
I didn't say it was close. I said it's close enough.
I love Sailor Moon. Bless Sailor Moon. My fucking inner child adores it. As the older I get and the more spirituality I get, the more I get into like astrology, it drives me insane how inaccurate the personalities are to the fucking planets. Anyway,
Were they supposed to be accurate to the planets?
I don't know, but probably not. But it bothers me. The colors aren't right. The personalities aren't right.
Mars is.
Why is Venus orange? It's unilaterally known that bitch is either green or pink, depending on the practice that you have. Anyway, it's fine. It's not fine, but
It's fine.
it's fine. Okay, so the last note I have here is cultural appropriation in the spiritual community.
Cultural appropriation.
So, New Age spirituality, why we have this insane man, trying to murder Congress people on January 6th a few years ago, claiming to be a shaman and who runs a Starseed Academy. Where did he even get all of that? Because I guarantee you he didn't see Nazis and go, Starseeds. Most people don't, there are some people out there who fucking do, Jesus Christ. But most people don't see themselves as the villain. Most people don't bother to do this kind of research or bother to ask too many questions. They see a thing in which they can be good and their ego is fed and they kind of fall into the trap of it. And oopsie poopsie, you were a white supremacist. So
No.
No, I know. New Age spirituality. Okay, this is what I wrote, and we'll talk about it. Almost everything and idea in New Age spiritualism has been taken from a variety of cultures without their consent or the needed cultural context for those ideas to have their full breadth of nuance. Essentially creating a Frankenstein's monster of incomplete ideas stolen from oppressed people and cultures. And that's what New Age spirituality starts to come to. So it is this Frankenstein's monster of this and then that and then this and then that. And I like that and I'm going to use that. But you also don't understand the full breadth of the nuance of why something is the way it is.
What about finding truth in everything?
I think it's one thing to take the time to immerse yourself in the culture that something comes from, to fully learn the nuance that I spoke about of
Right.
why it is the way it is and why things are structured in that culture that way and what it means spiritually and culturally and all those things. When you take the time to do that, you're going to respect it. Right? Versus just, I think one of the people I follow on TikTok, Kimo, on TikTok, the Light Seer, he is Hawaiian and his practice is Hawaiian High Seer. I'm not even going to try to say the thing that he is, but he made a video recently talking about the type of thing that he is. And there was this woman who was saying like, oh, I'm a this. And she said the name, but she completely mispronounced it. And he was just like, respectfully, no, you're not. Basically. And that's because if you were, you would know that the vibration of the word of that particular culture is integral to why the energy works the way it works. So for you to mispronounce it with this American accent is to not understand that, which is a core aspect of why that energy works the way it does.
So appropriation is just taking it at face value without knowing the inner details of why something is.
And being like, that's mine now, I'm going to use it. And that's an issue in a lot of ways. Like we could get into, there's so many aspects of New Age spirituality that's a thing.
No, I know there's a lot of flack when it comes to appropriation where people think
you do any, like you wear a kimono in Japan from a Japanese
and
person.
it's automatically like appropriation, right?
But all the Japanese people are like,
that's great,
and I'm so happy you're
and you've
respecting
seen
our
those
culture.
videos.
Yeah,
you've seen those videos where people are like, are you offended by this? And they're like, no, I think it's great. And they're like, so who's offended by it? And you just like, if like white,
it's a bunch of white people.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. But that's a great example that's not in a spiritual space. But when does it become an issue?
In a spiritual space?
No, not just in general. So like, I've not done this personally. This is an example I've seen people do. I'm wearing yukata or a kimono and I go to a Japanese run and own 100-year-old place and I get dressed and the people there tell me how to do it and they wrap me up and they tell me all of the things and blah, 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 blah. And then I go to a ceremony with people from the culture and I participate in the ceremony appropriately, blah, 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 blah.
What's the difference?
Versus, I'm going to go as a geisha for Halloween.
Yeah.
No.
There's
Like,
there's
no.
respect for it, and then I think it looks kind of cool.
I think it looks kind of cute, and I'm going to completely not follow any of the rules, not follow any of the culture.
I don't care what it's about.
Give a fuck what it's from or what it's about,
Yeah.
and I think it's so cute to dress up as for Halloween. So that in and of itself is a nuanced conversation, but in spiritual spaces, it comes to like, if you're going to learn about a thing, learn about it from people who are that thing, and learn about it with your whole chest.
Sure.
And learn about it with the goal of understanding it, not taking it and adopting it into something else.
Mm.
And in New Age spiritual spaces, we don't really do that. We just see a thing and go, oh my God, I like that. And then we Frankenstein's monster it together, which you can see how in alt-right pipelines you can be like, well, if alt-right is basically white nationalism and superiority and control and colonialism, right? You can see how they can go to a thing and be like, oh, you stupid little thing. Like, dehumanize them and blah, 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 blah. You just don't understand, but I like this and it's mine now. And you got everything else wrong, but I'm going to take what I like about it and use it for my own gain.
Yeah. Nitpicking
And
certain
that's
things.
New Age spirituality. And that's why there's like a lot of close practices and stuff. And that's why it's really important in spirituality. I personally encourage everybody to dive into your ancestry and dive into your own historical and heritage background. And that's when we get into like ancestral work and ancestral veneration and understanding the nuance of those things depending on the culture that you come from, which maybe that'll be an episode because I'm still learning and I find it all very fascinating.
And I do think if you're going to look at other magics and
Or spiritual
practices,
energy works or spiritual understandings or whatever.
do it with your chest.
Do it all the way.
Get
Read all the
an
books.
in-depth look. Don't take it at face value because face value lets you have a lot of mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where a lot of issues stem from.
Mm-hmm.
Information is good,
Yes.
especially in spiritual / magics.
Yeah.
You want to have the well-read title.
Yes. That's why I don't want to talk about the chakras or I don't want to talk about Kundalini. Remember you were like, what, the what? The Kundal what? What did you just say a few episodes ago? And I was like, I just know the word and I know what it's referring to in the spaces that I've heard it, but I haven't done the research on what it's come from. I haven't spent the time there, so I don't want to speak on it. But that's another thing. It's like, you just need to have your Kundalini awakening and then you're blah, 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 have an ego death and you just need to be able to do it and then you can do all of these things. I'm like, yeah, but what does that even mean?
Mm.
Do you know? It's from India. There's a few different practices in India, from my understanding. Who said it? What is it? You're supposed to be guided. It's supposed to be kind of an intense thing from somebody who knows what you're doing. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so I don't want to speak on that because I don't know. And it's same thing with chakras because the word chakra or chakra, if you're saying it correctly, is also from India. And
Right.
there's more than just the 7. And from my understanding, I have not done all the research on it, but they were there's like multiple of them and they're supposed to be holding places for gods or something. And
That I couldn't
there's
tell
a
you.
whole thing about it. There's a whole thing about it. And so even that in and of itself, though, that's something that I would want to talk to a person about. Like, I want a person who knows that shit to come here and tell me about it so I could understand fully.
Mm.
Because simultaneously, in my own experience, the idea of energetic centers in the body makes sense.
Yes.
Because I can physically feel them. But are they that? I don't want to say that, use that
And
without the understanding of it. Or
Yeah.
I'm just being a fucking hypocrite.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? What I do know, which is this is where research and understanding and doing your due diligence and your discernment, like we talked about, is important. Because through my understanding, there's the chakra system. And then in Celtic, I'm Scottish, so I've been trying to understand the Celtic understanding of things. There is something called the 3 cauldrons of power. You're above your head, in your heart, and your lower abdomen. They're the 3 cauldrons. And there are also in Jewish mysticism, they also have energy centers at certain parts of the body. So like this is an idea that we have in various cultures.
Yeah, across multiple.
And I'm sure there's even more that I'm not aware of. So it's like, okay, so the concept of a point in your body that perpetuates a certain flavor of energy is a thing, at least in many cultures, who all didn't particularly speak to each other. which is interesting. But the terminology and the cultural understanding of them is what we need to be respecting so that we don't fall into this disrespectful cultural appropriation thing with New Age spirituality.
Mm.
You know what I'm
Makes sense.
saying?
Yeah.
And that's why I personally find the act of like connecting with your ancestors and understanding your ancestry and where you come from is a rather important thing in your in any spiritual practice. Which, you know, that's a whole episode. I want to like start asking you questions, David, about it and like have a whole conversation about it, but it's been a minute now that I'm looking at how long we've been recording, and that's, you know, that's a whole conversation. Some people save that for next time.
Yeah, we'll save that for next
There
time.
was a few things that I was like, we got to talk about this and we got to talk about this, but I don't know what we'll talk about next, but there's a few things on the roster. Got a white boy on my roster.
I'm sure
Feed
we'll
me
find.
pasta and lobster.
I'm sure we'll find something.
But I don't have a white boy on my roster. I have a Boricua on my roster. And he feeds me cheesecake. He got me cheesecake for my birthday.
I did.
It was good.
We'll cut this out.
I won't.
All right.
Okay,
Well,
anyway. Okay, so I think we covered a lot of really good things. Again,
let's close out.
really want to urge, we might not have everything correct. I really did my best here. But if you know more things, give me your resources, bitch. I want to know. I want to learn. I want to grow. We want to grow together. We want to figure this out.
Mm-hmm.
And if anything we said upset you or like invalidated an experience of yours, I am sorry for that. I come to you with love and offer what I have at your feet, and you can do with it whatever you like. Have fun.
I'm sure we're going to tickle a lot of people with this one.
I don't know, but I'm trying. It's a discovery thing, and it's important to be self-critical. I've been self-critical, and I ask nothing more of anybody else that I have not done myself. So with that, thank you guys so much for listening. We do this podcast every week, mostly
Yeah, mostly.
on any podcast listening platform of your choice.
If you want any updates on what we are doing, feel free to follow us at I'm Psychic, I guess,
On any platform.
on any platform, though Twitter's dying.
Oh God, rip. I'm trying to get on Blue Sky, but I can't get an approval. Anyway. And also,
If
can
you want to follow our
personals
personals at
the DOOTLEZ.
at the DOOTLEZ.
Yeah, not much is being posted on any of those places, but I'm trying my best. I got medicine, and it's starting to kick in, and it's starting to get better. So here's hoping that stays the trend. We will talk to you guys next time. Okay, bye.
Bye, guys.